everyone. This is Talk Back. It's Tuesday, January 25th, and we have the pleasure of having our every so often conversation with our Congressman Joe Courtney from the 2nd District in Connecticut. Hi, Joe. It's great to see you this afternoon.
Good to see you, Sheila. Thank you for connecting again.
It's important that we get in touch with you every few months to see what's happening in Washington and to give us the truth about what's happening, because so much of the news is what's not happening, what's not getting accomplished, what's failing. But I want you to tell us first, what has this Congress done? What are the good pieces of legislation that have passed and how they affect our district? So why don't you tell us some of the good stuff that's already been passed and how it impacts?
Well, I mean, right out of the bat, this Congress passed the American Rescue Plan, which I think last time we talked, it was like the ink was barely dry on it. But we now have really seen the benefits unfold in Eastern Connecticut as well as across the country because of the Rescue Plan, which was about $1.9 trillion of COVID relief. And a large portion of it was really allocated to school districts to help with, again, reopening schools safely. As President Biden and Secretary Cardona pointed out the other day, that even though there's obviously some pockets in the country and even some schools in Eastern Connecticut that have struggled because of Omicron, still 96% of public schools K through 12 across America are open and in person in terms of learning. And so for Norwich had a one-day stoppage just because, again, there was a staff shortfall because of positive COVID tests. But again, as those infections start to subside, there's no question that full operations are happening. I was over at NFA the other day and saw it myself personally. And again, the rescue plan funding that came into school districts like Norwich were instrumental in terms of making sure that there was going to be sufficient funds to supplement staff. Again, some of the very COVID-related problems for kids in terms of behavioral health, they have been able to hire social workers like up in Vernon, where I'm from, with the school district there. And again, 2 weeks ago, there was a American Rescue Plan allotment for special education funding, where every single town in Eastern Connecticut received an extra allotment on top of the original elementary school funding that was in the rescue plan. And anyone else who's been around for a while knows that the underfunding of special education has been one of the biggest complaints of Board of Educations and school superintendents for as long as I've been in Congress and before that. And the American Rescue Plan actually came through with tangible new dollars to school districts like Norwich, who, again, behavioral health has been one of the biggest problems that I think teachers and families are encountering with kids who, the isolation caused by COVID has really accentuated a lot of mental health problems. So getting that special ed funding out there, which, again, would not be the case if we had not passed the rescue plan last March. Unfortunately, it was a 100% partisan vote. Not one Republican joined the Democrats, even though we voted on a bipartisan basis for the COVID bills like CARES Act in 2020. But thank goodness that we passed that measure, because with Omicron, whether it was with the test kits or the booster shot vaccination programs, all of that is possible because of the rescue plan that was included. The state of Connecticut received again, a huge allotment of funding because of the American Rescue Plan. Governor Lamont and the legislature were able to pass their budget last year with no tax increases, and again, stabilizing, funding in key programs such as, for example, the state police, who are now starting to graduate new classes of state troopers, because that's been basically, a pretty serious shortfall in terms of the ranks of the state police. By the way, the city of Norwich used its rescue plan money to add 3 police officers to their police department. We're seeing fire departments get help in terms of infrastructure, whether it's turnout gear for departments. So again, the rescue plan, which is still unfolding as we speak here, has been a godsend, because of the fact that COVID just continues to linger out there.
Right. And
the next big item, but I'll stop. If you want, I can go on.
All right. Well, yeah, I just want to finish up on the rescue plan because it also helped people stay in their businesses. It helped people overcome the unemployment that they had for a while, and people's jobs are coming back. Wages are coming back. I know we'll talk a little bit about inflation later, but we have to talk about the positive effects. And I just wanted to give one word or two on the COVID that we still have in Connecticut. We're still working with people who refuse to get vaccinated. That is a sore that is hurting us from making as much progress as we would like, right? Just comment on that. I know
Sure.
it's affecting the schools also because there are some kids that are not getting vaccinated. Also, a smaller percentage of kids are getting the vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, every bit of scientific, neutral, fact-based data demonstrates that the benefits of getting vaccinated and getting a booster shot has helped with this latest wave of Omicron in terms of the severity of infections that people may have experienced. Again, some people were infected who have been vaccinated, but on a percentage basis, I mean, you're a dozen times more likely to get infected if you've not been vaccinated. And again, the severity in terms of hospitalization and fatality or mortality is much higher. I was on a call yesterday to talk about the new funding that's coming into Electric Boat Shipyard. That shipyard is at 86% vaccination, which we'd like to see 100%. But compared to other shipyards around the country, particularly down south, where the vaccination rates are below 50%, EB has been able to sort of maintain operations and schedule better because they were able to promote a higher uptake in terms of the workforce getting vaccinated. So, and again, the rescue plan provided the financial support for that to happen. And in Connecticut, when the test kits have been going out, same thing. Rescue plan funded those test kits that were distributed to school districts by Governor Lott and the legislature early on. We're seeing again the rollout of the rescue plan funding. Again, the governor announced a $70 million investment in job training, which right now is critical for people to skills up with the demand for and job openings that exist here in the state of Connecticut. And again, the Eastern Connecticut Workforce Investment Board is going to be instrumental in terms of implementing that funding, which is over a 4-year period of time. Again, without the rescue plan, none of that would be available. And you talk to any employer group, whether it's CBIA or a local chamber of commerce, they will tell you that finding help right now is their biggest problem and their biggest challenge. And getting people the skills so that they can fill these job openings is key to making sure that this this recovery from the COVID recession as smooth as possible.
Let me turn to the issue of the infrastructure bill, which passed, and I want you to tell us about the impact it's going to have locally here in Eastern Connecticut.
Sure. So again, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, which again is the biggest infrastructure bill in American history, despite all the bravado from the prior administration, we were never able to pass an infrastructure bill because President Trump never came forward with a plan. That changed with the Biden administration, and we were able to get bipartisan support, particularly in the Senate, to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And as I said, it's a massive increase across the board in terms of surface transportation, roads and bridges money. The state of Connecticut's, which is where the funding is going to flow through to the State Department of Education, has been able to now stabilize their planning and funding for projects like Gold Star Bridge, which I think Sheila, that's the largest traffic river bridge in the state of Connecticut, and it was built in the 1940s. The northbound lane is really screaming out for repairs, and that project now is rock solid in terms of the ability for the Connecticut to make that bridge safe for people who commute across the bridge or interstate traffic that flows through it. The swing bridge up in East Haddam which again is about 120 years old, and breaks down and impedes both car traffic as well as boat traffic. Now that project is rock solid and in place. We've already had funding released for some of the small airports in Eastern Connecticut, Groton, Wyndham, and Danielson airports, which are really actually very awesome infrastructure to have in the state in Eastern Connecticut, but they are in really bad need of repair and upkeep and upgrade, and that funding now is already in hand in terms of it being implemented. The Army Corps of Engineers just announced last week that the infrastructure bill is going to allow them to move forward on a dredging project down in Westbrook, which, as you know, silt builds up on our side of the Long Island Sound, and getting dredging money is always just a very difficult challenge. So Westbrook's now locked in terms of a project this summer, as well as some new infrastructure way up in the Quiet Corner up in Thompson that received funding from the infrastructure bill. But more than just the traditional sort of roads and bridges and dredging, this bill is going to allow the country to basically go into the 21st century with electric vehicle transportation, with about $8 billion for EV charging stations. That's going to be funded through the infrastructure bill. The car dealers who are all seeing that the car manufacturers, both U.S. and foreign, are now completely switching over to electric vehicles. This is going to allow for a real system of people to get their vehicles recharged, and that includes, by the way, bus vehicles and postal trucks that are going to be converting to EV transportation, and lastly, the grid that is going to that we're going to need, because we need to upgrade the grid, first of all, for resiliency from climate change, weather events, which we've gone through ad nauseum in Connecticut. We need to strengthen the grid to avoid outages. But in addition to that, we also need more capacity, so that projects that are going to sprout up in terms of offshore wind, that we're going to have the cable lines and the grid capacity to take that voltage that's going to be generated off our coast, off the eastern coast, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and allow our economy to decarbonize, as they say, so that we can keep real growth, but do it in a way that is going to comply with what I think we all recognize is necessary to deal with climate change.
Those are all very important things. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is that we need to publicize all of that information, Congressman Joe. We talk about President Biden needing to go out into the country and let the communities know all the good things that this infrastructure bill will do. So are you planning to do something? Is President Biden coming to our area to tout these new innovations and the infrastructure bill and all the impact it has in Eastern Connecticut?
I think the White House is very intent on getting out there and spotlighting some of these projects. And I think some of his lieutenants, like the Secretary of Transportation, Buttigieg, the Secretary of Energy is also, I think, going to be somebody who's in high demand. Gina McCarthy, who is hails from Massachusetts and was the Commissioner of DEP back in the day under the Rell administration, is involved with the climate change projects. And I talked to Gina about coming up and doing an event in New London because the wind turbine assembly for offshore wind is going to take place at State Pier. So yes, the answer is, we've already been doing events. We did one with Governor Lamont in East Haddam to talk about the swing bridge. The Commissioner of Transportation, Joe Giletti, and his team, we did a big event in Hartford to sort of spotlight, again, projects all across the state. And, there's more. I did not mention the old Saybrook Rail Bridge, which crosses the Connecticut River. That's probably going to be one of the biggest Amtrak projects in the country. And we're going to be touting that. Those trains have to slow down when they go across the old Saybrook Bridge, because it's, again, another one that's 120 years old. It's all designed, but we needed the money to be able to fix, to do the replacement, and now the money's there.
Right. Just one long-standing sore spot in our area of Eastern Connecticut, Route 11, never finished.
Yes.
That's supposed to go from Colchester to London. Is there any prospect of that ever being brought up again?
So, when I mentioned that the funding, flows through the State Department of Transportation, they have what's called a STIP list, a Surface Transportation Infrastructure Plan, which is sort of the priority projects that are on there. So, for example, Gold Star is right at the top of the list. The I-95, 395 interchange in East Lyme, which that has that left exit if you're heading north, which is really had a pretty alarming incidents of accidents and difficulties that are there. That's on that list. That's there. Route 11, even though the Southeastern Council of Governments, has put it on their recommendation to state DOT, at this point, Route 11 is just still not made it onto the DOT, top 10 or 12. So
Okay.
it's it has to come from the community, and then it has to go through the process in Wethersfield before it's going to make it onto that list.
All right. Is there anything that you can do to tout it, to bring it on, to recommend that it be looked at?
No, I mean, we've been communicating that to state DOT, frequently. There, again, as I said, there's issues in terms of, environmental permits, which you're well familiar with, and some Native American tribal, issues in terms of the pass through that's there. So, again, I would say that, getting some of the projects that I mentioned earlier that have languished, like Gold Star, to a dangerous degree, and Old Saybrook and East Haddam, and there's more. There's the Route 82 issue in Norwich, which is also on that list, and Essex has gotten on the list in terms of some of their traffic configuration that's there. All I can tell you is Commissioner Giletti, who is an interesting guy because he's been in the transportation business for 40 years. He met with us in Washington a couple of weeks ago and just said, this is like by far the most transformational infrastructure bill that he's ever even come close to imagining, let alone experiencing during his time in transportation. And it's going to mean a lot of jobs. And it's, again, I think it's going to be good for Eastern Connecticut.
Okay, great. So now we want to turn to things that are still on the burner that we haven't passed yet, but we can still do it in time. I'm talking about the importance of the child care tax credit that lapsed and needs to be done again. I'm talking about community college, which was in the Build Back Better bill. I'm talking about prescription drugs. I'm talking about all of the strides in working on the environment and climate change, all the things that needed to be done. Those things were in that huge omnibus bill that hasn't passed yet. But tell me, what are we going to do to get some elements of that passed?
Sure. So again, to be clear, it did pass in the House, and some of those pieces, particularly for daycare, universal pre-K, passed through the Education Committee, which I am proud to sit on, and obviously it stalled in the Senate. I mean, it's been reported ad nauseum, and it's clear is that Senator Schumer called timeout and said, we're probably going to try and revisit this in March. Again, we have a budget resolution that's already been authorized, which allows for the 50+1 majority to pass some version of this bill. And also it's paid for. There is this is not like COVID emergency money, which was kind of handled on a sort of a disaster relief basis. The measure that went through the House, was paid for and addressed the very obvious need to have people who are in the $1 million a year plus category do more and share more in terms of investing in the country. There's clearly, I think, a bucket of issues where there really is not, in my opinion, much dispute or disagreement between the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate. And I mentioned, pre-K, universal pre-K, which is long overdue in this country, and the benefits of that we know from early childhood studies and analysis is blatantly obvious. Boosting support for daycare is another item that I think is also has very strong support across the board. Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, is along with many others. The climate change piece, which I mentioned that the infrastructure bill had some sort of down payment for trying to boost non-fossil fuel based electric power generation. The climate change measure that went through the House that was part of Build Back Better, includes a whole host of more tax credits and incentives for businesses and for families and individuals to be able to afford and pay for electric vehicles, to incentivize installation of solar power, geothermal, really trying to just use a whole host of measures to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Again, Senator Manchin, even though he hails from coal country in West Virginia, has indicated that he is supportive of that component of the bill that came through the House. I mean, where there's clearly a gap is in the question of extending the child tax credit, which I have to say is personally very frustrating, because I think the child tax credit, and based on your time in family law, Sheila, there is a child tax credit that predates Build Back Better and the American Rescue Plan. It is, again, though, for families who are in an income where they pay income tax and can take a credit for their children. The group that was left out was low income families who were working in many instances, but didn't generate enough to pay an income tax that they could take a credit off of. So what we did with the rescue plan was create a refundable tax credit, which picked up the families and the children that frankly are the neediest out there and need the help the most. We had almost a full year of child tax credit payments that went out through December 15th. The benefits of that, in terms of what I was hearing in the district, in terms of food banks, seeing less foot traffic with families that were able to put food on the table because of the child tax credit, or pay their utility bills because of the child tax credit, was just visible and local. I mean, it was not like some theoretical debate. Even though there was a lot of input that said that it really was helping families in terms of their ability to support their children without having to run to food banks and diaper banks to get help. But that clearly is still a matter of dispute, and whether or not we can sort of work it out and resolve it remains to be seen. I think it's important for us to finish sizable pieces of this, because I do think, whether it's universal pre-K, child daycare, and climate change investments, which will get this country really moving in a much more aggressive direction towards non-fossil fuel decarbonized economy, I think really means jobs and means a stronger future for our country.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hope that some of those come in pieces or as in aggregates of bills in the next few months. I also want you to talk about something that's important to you, and that is the rise of Medicare and prescription drug prices, which I know you've been working on for a very long time. Talk about that.
Yeah, by the way, I did not mention that was in the Build Back Better bill that came through the House, which was price negotiation for Medicare, which we would have taken those savings and plowed it into hearing aids and glasses, possibly some dental coverage, which have all been left out of Medicare for a long time. And hopefully we can figure out a way to include that in whatever the negotiations are with the Senate. But you and I were talking off camera about the fact that in January, I think a lot of seniors who were excited about the fact that they were getting a 6% increase in their Social Security monthly payments. The average boost of a $1,500 Social Security payment was about $90, that was going to be added to the monthly payment. But then, the there was sort of like an undertow caused by the fact that the Medicare Part B premium went from $148 to $170. And as you know, that gets deducted from your monthly Social Security check. There's been an interesting development, I think, just in the last month, because one of the reasons why that Medicare Part B premium went up so steeply for 2022 was the fact that last summer the Food and Drug Administration approved Aduhelm, which is a new medication that, again, there's hopefully promising results for Alzheimer's patients, which number about 6 million strong across the country, to at least maybe control the onset of Alzheimer's, particularly for those who've been diagnosed early. What Medicare was struggling with in the fall was that Biogen, the company that makes Aduhelm, announced that they were going to charge $56,000 per year per patient for Aduhelm, which is not a curative therapy, by the way. It requires just sort of ongoing medication. So this is just sort of an open-ended payment or cost for patients who use it. Trying to calculate the premium for Medicare Part B, because it had to be administered by either a doctor or a nurse, in a sort of office setting, and that's why it was in Part B. It was kind of like something they had to really kind of struggle with. So they just assumed the high end and were conservative in terms of the cost of $56,000 per patient, and also in terms of utilization, how many patients would actually use it. So that is why we ended up with $170 per month premium. In late December, Biogen, because of some of the pretty vociferous criticism of the price that they put out there, actually cut their cost in half from $56,000 to $28,000 for Aduhelm. In addition, Medicare indicated, because of some of the the newness of this medication, that they were going to limit it to only those patients who are getting it in an NIH clinical setting, which is again a much smaller cohort of patients. Well, when you add up those two factors, that the cost was cut in half and that the number of patients was pretty drastically reduced, it sort of begs the question is like, well, why are we keeping the premium at $170 per month? I led a letter in the House of Representatives with 31 of my colleagues, which I sent over last week, at the end of last week, to Secretary Becerra at the Department of Health and Human Services, again, raising our support for getting a revisit of this premium. And the good news is Secretary Becerra has ordered the Medicare actuaries, which fall under his department, to go back in and recalculate based on new data, which occurred subsequent to when they had increased the premium to $170 per month. We got our fingers crossed that, really, I think the math kind of seems pretty clear that there ought to be, a reset of that premium. It's never been done before by Social Security in terms of changing the premium in mid-calendar year. But again, we're still in January here, so it's worth it, in my opinion, for them to go back and make that change. We'll keep you posted in terms of that. But frankly, it is a almost poster child situation in terms of how, if we don't come up with better ways to regulate the pricing of medications, particularly new ones that are coming on market, the impact it's going to have in terms of programs like Medicare, Medicaid, which helps low-income patients, and private health insurance plans is just, almost mission impossible. We've really got to pass measures like the one that was in the House bill that came on Build Back Better, to allow the government to negotiate prices, just like we do in the VA system. They've been doing it for decades, just like governments all over the world. Free market economies, like France and Germany and Israel and others, where they just do not experience these incredible pricing points that almost occur exclusively in the U.S.
You want to talk for a minute about inflation, which the country is
Right.
talking about now, and an issue that is on everyone's mind, even though we have made strides in employment and in the the raise in working rates in people's incomes?
Sure. No, and it's obviously a topic that's very much on people's minds. When I was over at the Norwich Rotary Club, we had a good conversation about it. The arm of the government that really is the watchdog on inflation is the Federal Reserve Board, and they have teams of economists all over the country that are tracking this issue. And Jerome Powell, who President Biden renominated to continue as chair, when he testified in the Senate a couple days ago, I mean, he definitely said that the strength of the recovery in the job market in particular is something that they now clearly understand is driving bigger demand for particularly durable goods. That is a huge reason why they are kind of recalculating their projections in terms of what inflation stickiness is going to actually be. And I think he's right that I think the investments in stimulus have helped the economy recover quickly in terms of hiring, and we're at 3.9% unemployment. But it also has increased demand for a lot of goods where the prices are definitely going up, and that's particularly true, for example, in the automobile in the car market, and there's a shortage that's going on out there in terms of microchips that is reducing production levels. And if you combine high demand and lower production, as we know from Economics 101, that's going to result in higher prices. The microchip sort of production lines are hopefully going to get back on track, and we're going to see the price of cars start to moderate. The gas prices, where again higher demand, faster recovery of demand, combined with the fact that refinery production has taken longer to get up and running, and that, as you know, it's a world market, and there's parts of the world where oil and gas production have been interrupted because of sort of political events that are happening, like Kazakhstan. So Powell still, I think, is projecting that in 2022 we are going to start to see inflation begin to moderate. There are, again, sectors like housing and both in terms of rental and new and purchase of homes, where prices are because of high demand, still kind of a challenge for people who are looking to buy a house or find a rent. So we've got work to do. The Build Back Better bill, just for the record, that came out of the House, we actually increased support for housing supply in terms of both public units and affordable units, as well as other forms of housing. And it's I actually think that would have helped solve some of that problem, particularly in that sector. So we've got more work to do. It's and I think the White House, which is trying to deal with supply chain blockages that are happening out there and challenging, again, whether or not there's certain companies out there that are exploiting and price gouging in this environment, I think is going to be helpful. And I think we're going to see action by the Federal Reserve that maybe will be pulling back some of its monetary stimulus that they felt was justified, given the fact that we have just such an unprecedented recession caused by COVID.
Right. So in our last few moments, Joe, I want to talk about something that's on a lot of people's minds, but not on all of us. And we are so divided as a country today in so many ways. And most people are interested in these bread and butter issues that we've talked about that are important to you for making sure people have the proper standard of living and quality of life in Eastern Connecticut. But can we do all of this without talking about the survival of our democracy? And there are many people who I talk to who scoff at me and say, oh, come on, it would never happen that America would turn authoritarian. We're a democracy. I don't buy this, that our democracy is in trouble. So I want you to tell me, is our democracy in trouble? I know that the voting rights bills that were important to you and to most of the Democrats, and we thought to some Republicans, didn't pass last week. What is the state of our democracy today? And do we have to worry that authoritarianism is on the rise in this country?
Well, I think authoritarianism is on the rise all over the world, and I don't think the U.S. is, you know, in a bubble that's immune to some of those forces that are out there. You know, the good news in terms of the last election was it was the highest voter turnout, going back to the early 1900s. I mean, and some of the measures that were taken to respond to COVID that enabled people to participate to a higher degree, I think were handled extremely professionally and expertly. By the way, in the second congressional district, we had 367,000 people turn out and vote, which again is a record, and was the highest of the 5 congressional districts in the state of Connecticut, which I think, you know, all the registrars should take a bow in terms of you know, their great work in terms of you know, handling that incredible increase in volume that came through. But you know, obviously a lot's happened since the election in terms of January 6th, where we know now from over 700 indictments that have come through the Department of Justice by career professional U.S. attorneys and assistant U.S. attorneys. You know, that you know, this was not you know, a normal sort of protest that took place there, and the most recent indictments for sedition really, again, I think took the seriousness of what occurred that day to a level that I still think people like, and I still kind of pinch myself a little bit because I was there at the Capitol on January 6th, that you know, we would ever be confronted by, you know, a violent event that really was trying to block a constitutional process. You know, unfortunately, we still have not come together as a country to agree that we can, you know, we need to address that. But I do think that the work of the January 6th committee, which does have some brave Republican souls serving on it, is going to continue apace. And I think the Justice Department and some of the other you know, enforcement authorities in places like Georgia are going to continue to do their job to go back and really you know, push back in terms of, you know, I think some of the threats that took place and continue to take place in terms of elections. The voting rights bill was a huge disappointment. We have, if you add up the 222 House members in the House, Democratic House members in the House, and the 50 in the Senate, that's 272. We had 270 who came together and supported the John Lewis Protect the Vote Act. And unfortunately, we had 2 that didn't, in my opinion, do what was obvious, which was to allow a carve out from the filibuster rule to let those bills proceed and go to the president's desk. And here's why I think it's important, particularly in terms of your question, Sheila, is that in the wake of the election, 19 states have passed 33 laws that have restricted access to voting, which again, in my opinion, was totally unjustified given the success that took place in terms of a safe and fair election that we know happened in 2020. We had states like Georgia that are now criminalizing handing out water bottles and you know, peanut butter sandwiches for people who are in you know, lines of at polling places that sometimes can take hours to go through. You know, that's a state that's also reducing the number of polling places, polling hours. You know, this is not happening by coincidence. There is a concerted effort, which, you know, thankfully was not adopted in Connecticut, although there was some bills that were introduced along the same lines, you know, that are, in my opinion, just responding in exactly the wrong way in terms of, you know, trying to, you know, nurture our democratic system. So, you know, we've got work ahead. It's, you know, there may be some sort of compromise bill in terms of that, you know, issue of certification of election results, which we haven't seen a bill yet. So who knows whether that's going to materialize. I thought Michelle Obama actually had the most, you know, I think useful position that she took a couple of weeks ago, where she basically said, okay, let's, you know, do everything we can to pass voting rights reform. But in the meantime, let's register 1 million people for the 2022 election. And she said, you know, we'll do it on a nonpartisan basis, but, you know, we individuals can make a difference. We're not helpless in terms of, you know, still, particularly in a state like Connecticut, in terms of making sure that, you know, we're going to continue to nurture and guard, you know, access to voting. And 2022 is going to be another one of those gut check elections for the country. So that's where I think, as somebody who is running again in 2022, and focused on is that we can't just sort of wring our hands and get sort of trapped in the feedback loop about the Senate procedures. We still have options and choices in terms of what we can do as individual citizens, and we really should not hesitate and wait. It's time to do what the former First Lady suggested, which is to go out and take matters into our own hands.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming and giving us the progress report. We're going to be in touch in the next few months. And yeah, I agree with you. Registration is important. The more people that vote, we have to get around whatever restrictions all those Republican states are doing with their laws. But I think many people believe, I certainly do, and I hope you do, we still have to find out what exactly happened, and we have to hold ex-President Trump accountable and all of his minions and all of his people accountable for what they did, the damage they did to our democracy and to our voting systems. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I was very pleased the Supreme Court ruled 9-1 that 8-1 that that the archives has to turn over his emails and his and so that was very encouraging.
Right. All right, Joe, it's always great to have you, and good luck in your work and getting your colleagues to agree to pass all of the important things of the Build Back Better agenda. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.